All right, let's get into Friday feedback, your opportunity to send in questions, comments, criticisms, and occasionally trolling, and I will respond to some of it. You can email, you can post on TikTok, you can post to YouTube. We'll sometimes look at Spotify comments. It's all fair game, is the point. All right, on YouTube, Secret Society of Goths said, Pakman's letting the beard grow and wearing goth tees. Shit's getting serious. Well, I don't know that I have any goth tees, to be honest, but there is really no grand aesthetic plan here. I know that there is a small sliver of the audience that is very carefully analyzing everything I do. Is my hair weirdly pointy on one side, or am I sending some kind of message with the shirt I'm wearing? It's more like, what amount of time does my toddler provide me with to get myself ready? If I have time to shave, I do it. And if I don't, the beard grows. There's no like look that I'm going for here. It's really not a branding shift of any kind. It's just like, what can I do? But it is funny how people pick up on these visual changes, and they're often interpreted as signals. And we're really leaving behind what I think is the most important thing, which is, where am I on authoritarianism? Where am I on, anyway. And it's all, the personal is getting very political, and everything has meaning. But in my case, it really doesn't have meaning. I'm just trying to, keep the hygiene going to the extent that I can. All right. Next is from the subreddit. It's Redage, who said, is there any chance Elon is faking his divorce with Trump, in the sense that this bickering between them is just a ruse to distract from other failings of the administration, such as the disastrous bills, the failures in foreign policy, and to hide the crypto scandals? So, I understand why people look for meaning and signal in the noise and the chaos. Is this a distraction from that? Was that coordinated in order to make people not pay attention to this other thing? I just think it all gives this administration way too much credit. The idea that they have a long game where they carefully use strategic distractions, we've seen zero evidence of that whatsoever. When I see what appears to be dysfunction, I have every reason to believe that it is dysfunction and not design. And so the Trump-Musk fallout was certainly predictable, and we'll get to that in a moment. It's sort of like what happens when egos collide and everybody wants the spotlight. I believe that it is genuine. The administration's failures don't really, listen, it's all out in plain view. I don't think sleight of hand is responsible for what we see. And so when we see a fight or a contradiction, just look at over the weekend, the Iran stuff is not regime change. Of course, we would want regime change. Why not? Trump gets in on it, and Caroline Leavitt gets in on it. I just think this is the policy. It's total chaos. Fights on social media, and then the next day, who would ever want A? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So no, I don't attribute malice where stupidity and incompetence are enough. Now, relatedly, Timubrin wrote on the subreddit, how did David from the beginning predict that the Trump-Musk romance will fail in the end? I remember tuning into the show all the way back in the early months of the second term and could hear David say again and again that this relationship won't last. And lo and behold, now took him less than a year. I love the praise, right? Because there's so much negativity in the email. I don't believe that it was a particularly insightful or prescient prediction that the Trump-Musk romance was going to implode. Trump doesn't want to share power. Elon Musk doesn't want to take orders. Elon Musk is used to his money getting him absolutely whatever he wants. When you look at two egomaniacs come together in that way, it's very obviously an arrangement with a shelf life and not a particularly long one, because once the photo ops are over, and Trump starts to get annoyed with Elon kind of hanging around, Elon starts getting annoyed with the fact that Trump does whatever the last person who he talks to suggests he should do, it all boils over. And it was transactional from the beginning, not ideological. And the transaction stopped working, if that makes sense. What's wild is how much people projected onto the Trump-Musk relationship. There were people who said, oh, Musk is the libertarian tech savior. He's going to temper Trump's worst impulses. And it turns out that if you put two guys who think that they're the smartest in the same room, it's a matter of time before it implodes. So I would love to take more credit for it. But unfortunately, I think that it was a relatively obvious prediction. All right. Norin Rad on Facebook says, I'm all for peaceful protests. We need to keep the protests peaceful. But David, how long do the people keep it peaceful? It seems like the taco regime keeps escalating things. I've talked about this in a number of different contexts. I think the instinct to stay peaceful is correct and powerful, and history shows that it works. Civil rights movements, mass labor actions, even some revolutions have made real change without violence. There's also a pattern that we sometimes see, which is when governments escalate with repression, people naturally start to say, can we do this peacefully? If they just repress, can we really accomplish the change we want peacefully? And some people are bringing that up right now. So I'm going to go to history, right? I'm not going to be here advocating for violence because I don't. I advocate for peaceful protest. I also am a student of history. And what we see is that the longer administrations or regimes ignore legitimate grievances, respond with crackdowns, etc., the more it pushes people to the edge. So while I am not advocating violence, because I never do, I'm against it, I think it's also necessary to acknowledge that the states have power that, when abused, can radicalize the very people they want to silence. And so without advocating violence, I'm acknowledging that that is something we have seen historically. And I hope that it doesn't come to that. Terminal Willness on Reddit said, David's argument against socialism. Can someone elaborate on the reason David doesn't outright endorse socialism? I've heard him explain his rationale before, but he seemed strangely unwilling to really go into it. My take is he opposes socialism because he doesn't want something he believes is coercive to become prominent. Is that right? Can someone flesh it out? Well, I can flesh it out since it's my view. First of all, the reason I don't outright endorse socialism is I am not a socialist. Why would I endorse something I don't believe in? I believe in markets for many things because I'm a small L libertarian. I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party. What I mean is, on a spectrum between authoritarianism or libertarianism from the government, I default to libertarianism unless there's a good reason to involve the government. Healthcare, there's a good reason to involve the government. Education, housing, these are basic human needs. If we leave them to market forces, we get suffering, we get inequality, we get people with a lower standard of living than anyone needs to have in a rich country. So that's why I identify as a social democrat. For other things, basketball sneakers or tablet computers or whatever, I think markets are fine at allocating resources. So I don't oppose socialism because I think equality is bad. If we're talking about equality of opportunity, I oppose socialism because to impose it on all industries is authoritarian if it's done by the government. Now, if individual companies say, we're going to be a co-op, I love that. That is the libertarian, small L libertarian way. Let companies that want to be co-ops be co-ops. So I believe in using democratic means through taxation, the way Northern European countries do, to fund universal programs and strong public goods, strong public schools, regulate anywhere that is necessary. But I don't want to impose that ideology from above. So that's why I am not a socialist. Okay, Edward Richardson wrote on YouTube about last week's protests and Trump's military parade. 12 million protesters 8,600 at Trump's parade. You know, sometimes the numbers don't tell you everything you need to know. These numbers tell you a lot, not just about turnout, but also about momentum. When millions mobilize and protest while a sitting president struggles to fill a parade route, that is more than a messaging problem. That's a legitimacy crisis. People don't take to the streets in these numbers, and I wish they were bigger, but people don't take to the streets in these numbers unless they feel unheard, betrayed, afraid. Mass protests aren't just about optics. They really are barometers of public trust. When trust collapses, it becomes difficult to govern by fear, spectacle, or nostalgia. And so Trump can hold as many of these parades as he wants. If people don't show up, and by the way, some of the people showing up were protesting the parade, it's just a performance. It's really not leadership. And that terrifies Trump because to a great degree, above all else, Trump really wants to be liked. And a lot of people do not like him. Dog Boy says, I'm having a good laugh listening to the MAGA faithful trying to put a positive spin on Trump's military parade debacle. Yeah, it's actually more than just spin. We saw desperation. When an event so clearly flops and the response is pretend it was a success. Stephen Chung, I believe his name is, was talking about how awesome and successful it was. These are cult dynamics. The goal becomes protect the image of the dear leader at all costs. Even if it's completely unbelievable, even if anybody who wanted could have tuned in and seen a silent parade route with a squeaky tank rolling by, you've got to say that it was awesome. And it's important to remember that optics were one part of Trump's military parade, but also asserting power was part of it. And when the assertion of power is met with empty bleachers and squeaky tanks, it does send a message. This guy may not really have the strength and testicular fortitude that he claims to have. MG, with an exhausting message on YouTube, says he's only been in office for 147 days. Let that sink in. Yeah, I mean, we've gone from inauguration to burnout. It was a lot quicker than 147 days, but this is about the exhausting nature of the volume of the insane headlines, the content of the headlines, the scandals, the policy failures, the firings, the authoritarianism. This is not like a normal political situation. And people are exhausted, but also the content creators are exhausted. Everybody I talk to comes to me on the verge of tears. And they say, you know, I took an hour to go play basketball with my friends, as we often hear people talk about Trump that way. I took an hour to play basketball. I came back. We had bombed Iran or whatever, right? Insert the appropriate story. There is a sheer pace of chaos that makes it hard to cover this stuff. It also makes people numb. It makes them tune out. It makes people say, oh, is my resistance futile? Because what can I really do about all this? But I think the important thing to remember is when we tune out, then they get to do whatever they want unopposed. And that we definitely don't want. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. Make sure you're getting my Substack at davidpakman.substack.com. We will see you on the bonus show, and I will be back next week, of course. You know, for weeks now, discussions have focused on Trump's big, beautiful bill and its potential Medicaid cuts. However, a far more dangerous, overlooked provision in the bill exists. At ground.news/Pakman, you'll discover what MAGA lawmakers quietly included, a provision that could block federal judges from enforcing court orders unless a bond is posted. And if this passes, it could render Trump above the law. This is a critical detail. It's largely unknown, and it really exemplifies this flood the zone strategy of the Trump administration. Now, this is why ground news is essential. It really is the best way to uncover buried information by showing you not just the story, but its origins across the political spectrum. You can see bias ratings, credibility scores, coverage timelines, and their browser extension also will flag potential bias when you're on a news site, sort of guiding you to more reliable sources for fact checking. Ground News gives you a smarter and more reliable way to stay informed. I'm partnering with them to give you 40% off their unlimited Vantage plan, which makes it just $5 a month. Visit ground.news/Pakman, scan the QR code, or use the code Pakman in the app to start. The link is in the description.